Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to another episode of the Third Eye Productions. Today I'm going to start off discussing some of the history of global land grabbing agenda. And then I'm going to talk about some of the various reasons as to why they're doing it. And then I'm going to talk about some possible solutions that could preserve our right to a collectively owned land and grow organic food and also produce subsidized housing. So let's get into some of the historical reasons as to why colonial settlers had the initiative to steal other people's land. I'm going to talk about this article called How the Dawes Act Stole 90 Million Acres of Native American Land. Some of you might be familiar with the story called the Trail of Tears, which 15,000 Native American men, women, and children died during a forced relocation from their tribal homeland from Southeast Territory of America to modern-day Oklahoma, which was forced by the Act of 1830, which authorized the Trail of Tears. And during the next 100 years, Congress passed series of laws systematically stripping tons of land away from the Native Americans and sold it to white settlers and corporations. The Dawes Act might have been the most vicious policy that was also called the General Allotment Act of 1887, which resulted in an astounding 90 million acres of land being stolen from the natives, which took about 47 years to accomplish. The colonial settlers' need for the expansion of their industrial initiatives created an Indian problem that led them to engaging in a cultural assimilationism, in which the Indians would later realize the rigged white capitalist industrial way of doing business would become detrimental to their way of life and survival. But before the Dawes Act of the Native American land, including the reservation, was communally owned by the tribe, and the fruits of their labor were shared collectively by the tribal members. And for most of the 19th century, Americans, the traditional native way of travel was antithetical to American ideas of personal responsibility and the concept of capitalism, which wouldn't surprise anyone to know that Teddy Roosevelt described the Dawes Act as a mighty pulverizing engine to break the tribal mass and make the Indian work like any other man on the ground. The Dawes Act tribal land would be divided into allotments between 40 to 160 acres and legally changed from community property to private-owned parcels of land, and sometimes the natives were able to choose their allotments, but in most cases it was assigned by the U.S. officers, Departments of Interior. And after the small allotment was assigned the natives, the surplus could be sold to white settlers and corporations. And the surplus of land was estimated to be about 60 million acres, while the creators of the Dawes Act indicated the natives weren't competent enough to own their allotments, so the deeds of the land were held in government trust and for 25 years, while settlers were exempt from it. Not only that, after 25 years the land trust expired. The natives were required to pay taxes on land that was taken from them, and most of the time they didn't have the money to pay, which resulted in their land being seized and sold by white settlers. This issue was and still is a problem in the modern day society, creating conditions and systems that allows land vultures to persist. By continuing to pass laws that made it easier to seize the land of the natives, like the Burke Act of 1906, authorized the Secretary of Interior to deem a Native American landowner competent to receive the deed to his own land, at which one point taxes were due, without the knowledge or consent of the Native American landowners, which often ended up in foreclosure. And to put it into perspective, if large amounts of white people were to move into Native American territory, it would become an American state, which is not that much different to what is going on like Israel, which is why Jewish are encouraged to move to Israel while killing and displacing the Palestinian people, which leads to an obvious conclusion as to why the colonial settlers created unjust laws to justify robbing, stealing, and pillaging Native American land, which is why private ownership allowed the owner to receive the fruits of their material labor which allowed the owner to lend the land to Indians or slaves to farm, and in return give the owner a portion of the crops or pay rent for land usage, which is known as sharecropping. And in the European context, relations were sometimes derived as a relation of domination, which is why when you look at the modern day global land grabbing initiative, similar unjust laws and tactics and even modern day tactics are designed to create an unequal, unjust way of taking land. And in the U.S., historically, land has been linked to structural racism initiatives that stem from what is called redlining, or property occupied by large amounts of African Americans would have a lower resale value compared to land owned by white land property owners. The redlining initiative also prevented African Americans from buying property in white neighborhoods by artificially gouging prices of the properties, making it unaffordable for African Americans to purchase property in white communities, which created the conditions that altered property value based on the racial demographics of the community. In the early 1900s in Minneapolis, there was what you would call a racial covenant that prohibited African Americans from buying property in certain parts of the state. Here's a clip showing that exact same thing.
And there's this tool that they become aware of. It's called a racial covenant. And so just a few months after this confrontation, you see the first racial covenant appear in a Minneapolis property.
And this is where you first see this racial language.
Caucasians only, Aryans only, no Negroes or no members of African blood or descent.
100% of them were aimed at Black people.
In many ways, racial covenants, this is kind of ground zero of residential segregation. In the United States, and racism have a very, very long history, but this particular deployment of racism is fairly new, and this idea was really made material through instruments like racial covenants.
It starts out as private property developers, but eventually you have the federal government encouraging these racial covenants, demanding actually that any investment they make is protected with this kind of racial exclusivity.
When you can covenant entire areas of the city, it makes it off limits. That's pretty powerful. I'm pretty sure I know who wrote that covenant, and that was one Edmund G. Walton. He was a real estate developer. But the racial covenants that we're concerned with tells you who can or cannot live, lease, even occupy certain spaces.
Racially restrictive covenants, private contracts between individuals that allow them to dictate to whom they'll sell their property.
Another name for this racial covenant agenda is structural racism or systemic racism. And I think it's one of the reasons structural racism is often left out of the discussion about race, especially when it's correlated to land ownership. It's because it produces an unequal distribution of land ownership and control of resources to the point where you can be controlled directly or indirectly. Like for an example, the landowners will often lease land or property they own to people that don't own any land. And by leasing land to landless people, you can charge them a higher rent or make rules forbidding them from having pets or growing food on the owner's property, etc. Which is why their initiative to own most of the land allows the wealthy to extract rent and have direct or indirect control of landless people, which is why they glamorize greed, the concentration of wealth, and the power to rule, oppress, and dehumanize others as someone worthy to be put on a pedestal or a throne. Now it's time to shift gears. I'm going to show you a clip of a politician that questions a corporation for taking away a farmer's land.
You say the lights stay on. Are lights going to stay on in the state of Missouri from this project? My understanding is, as originally planned, the transmission line wouldn't benefit the residents of Missouri at all.
Lights staying on across the entire country. We're talking about not.
But you're taking Missourians' land.
I'm sorry?
You're taking Missourians' land from them.
And
you've gone to court, your company has gone to court and sued Missouri farmers to take away their land. This isn't speculative. I mean, you've actually used this corporate power, which frankly I'm not sure you should have, to seize land from Missouri farmers that's been in their families for generations.
Well, sir, I would actually say that I think about, we would have power that would go into communities in Missouri. So I would just, I'm happy.
That's the new Tiger Connector line. So after it was pointed out that your original Grain Belt Express did nothing for the state of Missouri, then you came back and said, well, we'll add something more. So what commitments are you going to give the farmers and residents of Missouri today that they'll actually benefit from this land grab?
Yes, sir. Since we, as Invenergy, have taken over this project, we have done an inordinate amount of community engagement. We will continue to do direct community engagement. This project did not start with us, but we took it on, and we took it on with the objective to make sure that the communities are well spoken to and well heard from, in order to make sure.
What are they going to get? Are Missouri farmers and residents, are they going to get lower energy prices out of this? Are they? How are they going to benefit? You're putting a huge transmission line across 200 miles of land in the state of Missouri. You have gone to court to seize the land from Missouri farmers. You're a private corporation, aren't you?
Yes, we are, sir.
But how much money are you making on this?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Would you? I'm really curious because you've got Missouri farmers who, in many cases, these are small family farms. These are not massive corporate farmers. This land has been in their family for generations. They just want to be left alone and be able to farm. And you're a major corporation who's coming in here and taking them to court literally to take their land. And then the benefit they get from it is nothing for the state of Missouri. And you talk about the national good, so your message to them is, give us a big, rich corporation your land, or we'll take it from you, and you should just live with it.
Sir, I'm sure that that's not the message that we're trying to.
That's what they're hearing.
And I would say that since we did take it, since Invenergy took over this project, we have changed direction of the project. We've changed the path of the project to suit the community's needs and the community's demands.
So will you pledge not to exercise eminent domain in the state of Missouri?
I'm not authorized to.
That's a no.
If you're wondering why politicians often project this non-threatening, controlled oppositions toward corporations, it's obviously because of the government is a corporation itself. When you go back to the history and documents of it, which would also give validation to the public-private partnership or state capitalists being in cahoots with corporate capitalists. This would give some people this false sense of land ownership and even home ownership. After hearing this, you might say, what can we do about this land grabbing agenda? Well, there are activists and people that are organizing to become land owners or at least obtain control of some land through land trusts. And I won't have time to go into some of the success stories of activists making progress in their fight to achieve liberation. I will say this, those who value localized communal sovereignty, the ability to build alternative systems of liberation, the ability to be communally or individually sufficient by obtaining atmospheric water generators and alternative energy sources, to obtain outsourced technology that will allow tool making and the ability to build homes on land that we control become essential for creating subsidized housing, which is why I say the ultimate path to freedom is to decommodify the land and take it out of the land vulture's hands. Thanks for listening. And if you have any suggestions or any videos, topics, or discussions you want me to talk about in future podcasts, just leave a comment and I will respond in a timely manner. Let's continue to build and fight. If you want to hear the extended version of this podcast, go to Spotify and click on Third Eye Productions, Land Grabbing Agenda. Thank you.